The conference championship games are over, and what a weekend it was in college football. What's going on YouTube? This is SG1 Sports. You're watching our college football channel. I'm going to give you my projections of what the playoff rankings are going to look like tomorrow, at least the top 10, and also the New Year's Six bowls as well, and show you who I think is going to make it into the college football playoff. And I'll go through a lot of reasons why I think it's going to be the way that it is. To me, it's clear cut. I don't think there's I would be very surprised if it's not the way I'm about to show you. You watch a lot of the people on TV, all the experts on TV, and I don't normally watch like halftime shows and pregame shows and things like that because I'm usually watching all the games during the season. I'm watching a game that maybe has already finished, and I'm catching up on that game, and I just don't take any time to really watch these people, and so I don't really hear their opinions very much. But if you watch the guys on Fox, I mean, every one of them, they seem adamant on Alabama and Texas being in the college football playoff and Florida State not making it in. And then you go to the ESPN side of things, and it seems like it was a little bit more split, I guess. I really like the take from Booger McFarland. I think he was on there at halftime of the Florida State game. And basically everything that he said is what I agree with, and I'll maybe kind of come back to that once I show you the rankings. So this is what I think it's going to look like. Again, my projections. I know most people, or a lot of people, are going to disagree with this, and I think a lot of people are going to be unhappy tomorrow, but this is what I think the committee is going to do. And again, I'll get into some of the reasons in just a second. So this is the bottom 5. This is what I think, or I should say 6 through 10. These are what 6 through 10 I think are going to look like. I think you're going to see still Missouri and Penn State there at 9 and 10. I think Oregon's going to drop to number 8. I think they're going to drop behind Ohio State, and I think Georgia's going to drop all the way down to 6, which seems kind of crazy to go from 1 to 6. And a lot of people keep saying things like, a one-loss SEC champion cannot be left out. You cannot, the defending champs, you can't go from 1 to 6 and all these things. These things have never happened. This was an unprecedented year. If you look at these rankings, we have never had this many undefeated and one-loss teams going into the conference championship games, at least teams that were still alive in the playoff picture. I'm talking about Power 5 teams. We've never had a year like this where so many teams were alive going into this weekend, and there was a path for so many different teams. It just hasn't gone that way. I don't know if I'd have to go back and look. I'm not even sure if we've had 3 undefeated Power 5 champions before. Maybe we have. I can't remember. Again, I didn't look this up. But it was just a different year. And when you had all those teams packed in there, that's how you can see teams going potentially from 1 to 6, or maybe a team like Alabama going from 8 to 4. You could see something like that happening just, again, because those 8 teams were so close. They were so close together that it didn't take much for teams to move a whole lot in those 8 spots. So this is what I think 6 through 10 is going to look like. I do think Georgia will fall. I think they will definitely be behind Alabama. Those teams have very similar resumes. Alabama just beat them. They've got the head-to-head. And so I do think that Georgia falls to number 6. So let's get to the top 5 now, and we will start with the top 2 teams. Pretty obvious here, Michigan and Washington at 1 and 2. I think that there is a case to be made for Washington actually being ahead of Michigan because they've got 2 wins over Oregon. That means they have 2 wins over top 8 teams. Michigan only has the 1 win over Ohio State. Then they've also got the win over Penn State. What I think this is going to come down to is the fact that Michigan has just been a more dominant team throughout the season. Washington actually probably has the better resume, but if you look at the team that has performed better throughout the season, that has been Michigan. And I think that the committee is going to keep Michigan there. They were already ahead, and I think that's what it's going to be. Now, again, it wouldn't shock me if this flipped. I would not be shocked if Washington wound up at number 1 and Michigan wound up at number 2 if they go strictly based off of the resume. So now I'm going to show you all at once here, 3, 4, and 5, what I think it's going to look like. And again, I don't think there's any controversy. I think it's clear cut, and I think this is what it's going to look like. And like I said, I would be very surprised if it does not look like this. 3 through 5 right there. I believe that's what it's going to look like. And again, I keep hearing Texas, Alabama over Florida State. I just do not see that happening. The only reason that could possibly happen is if the committee says, well, this is just a different Florida State team. They're different without Jordan Travis. We don't think they're a top 4 team without him. But that penalizes the rest of the team, and I don't think you can do that. I just don't think they're going to do that. and you could say, well, yeah, they're not going to. One thing that's on Texas and Alabama's side is actually that this is the last year of the 14 playoffs. So you could say, well, they're not going to set that precedent. Well, it doesn't matter after this because we're going to a 12-team playoff. So really, they can do whatever they want. So in that case, maybe if they believe Texas and Alabama are better and they like the matchups better, they might put them ahead of Florida State. But it would go against everything they've ever done. Again, you look at Florida State; they were number 3 in the rankings this week. Alabama was number 8, and Florida State just went out and beat a top 15 team. Yes, Alabama beat the number 1 team in the country, but a team that now, after this weekend, is potentially going to be number 6. Florida State also had a big win, and they have no losses, and that's the big difference here. If we were comparing one-loss teams, sure, Alabama would be ahead of Florida State, but I don't think they're going to be ahead of an undefeated Florida State, and I'm going to show you some comparisons in just a second. But to Texas and Alabama, I just don't see any way you move Alabama ahead of Texas. Don't see any way. I don't care that they just beat Georgia. That's just not going to be enough, in my opinion, when Texas beat them in Tuscaloosa. And you can say, well, look at how much better Alabama's playing now. Well, are we judging them how they are now or what they've done throughout the season? It should be about the entire season. At least that's what it's supposed to be. And so I just don't see Alabama jumping ahead of Texas. Just don't see it happening. If Florida State does finish 3 and Alabama moves ahead of Texas, then I mean, that's just awful, because that you're penalizing Texas for playing Alabama in the non-conference. Not just playing them, but going on the road and beating them. That just cannot happen. That is really bad for college football. Again, if you're saying that the Texas and Alabama are better than Florida State, and the committee just says that we think they're better teams, and they put them ahead of them, I mean, it's possible. It could happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. And so all this talk about, we want the best 4 teams. Well, how do you tell who the best 4 teams are? You find out who the best teams are when they play each other on the field. They haven't played each other. They don't have a lot of common opponents, things like that. How do you know that Alabama's a better team than Florida State? What do you have that? What tells you that? I mean, you just have nothing. You look at what Alabama's done in the SEC. Well, Florida State's 2-0 against the SEC. I mean, that's just, it has to be, in my opinion. Yes, you're trying to get the best 4 teams, but the teams that deserve to get there based off of what they have done on the field, not the way they've looked, but what they've done, the results on the field. And again, going back to Booger McFarland, he really summed that up. If you happen to see him, I think at halftime of the Florida State game. So here's some comparisons. Again, to me, there's no doubt about it. Texas will be ahead of Alabama. So it comes down to Florida State, Alabama, and do they put Texas and Alabama ahead of Florida State? Because I think that's kind of a package deal. I think those 2 teams both go ahead of Florida State, or they both stay behind them. And again, this is the way I think it's going to be. But let's just look at some comparisons here. First of all this talk about, you can't leave the SEC out. The SEC is the best conference. Well, this year, they haven't proven that. I know in the past they have, and I still believe they're the best conference, but you have to go by what's happened this season. I mean, these are some of the games this season. LSU lost to Florida State. Alabama lost to Texas. South Carolina lost to North Carolina. They also lost to Clemson. Florida lost to Utah. Arkansas lost to BYU. The SEC just did not come through in the non-conference, and that has to matter. These games have to matter. And again, I'm an SEC fan. It just is what it is. I try to stay unbiased here and look at it from an unbiased standpoint, and these are the results. I mean, these are facts. And then if you just compare some games with Alabama and Florida State, look at this. Alabama beat LSU 42-28. Florida State beat LSU 45-24. They beat them easier. LSU was really in that game late against Alabama. And I know these aren't the exact same opponents, but Florida and Auburn are very comparable teams in the SEC. Alabama beat Auburn on a miracle play, 27-24. Florida State beat Florida by 9 with Tate Rodmaker. So that wasn't even with Jordan Travis. You look at these comparisons and all this and the struggles of the SEC, it just does not make sense, in my opinion, at least based off of what I think the committee's going to do. Doesn't make sense to put Alabama and Texas ahead of Florida State. Florida State should be at number 3, and I believe they will be. So now let's go through the rest of the New Year's Six Bowls and what I'm projecting. We'll start with the Orange Bowl. So how about this? Louisville, Alabama. I think Alabama at number 5 will be the highest ranked Big Ten or SEC team. Louisville will represent the ACC. If they do drop Florida State, then obviously Florida State winds up here and probably playing Ohio State, because if they drop Florida State, Alabama's going to be in the playoff. I'm really curious to see what they do. Again, I think a lot of people think that Alabama and Texas will be ahead of Florida State, and I just don't think the committee's going to do that. Next, we got the Cotton Bowl. I think this is going to be Missouri and Liberty. Perhaps SMU gets in there. I think SMU's a better team than Liberty, but look, Liberty went undefeated. I can see both sides of this. You know, SMU's 2 losses were to Power 5 teams. Liberty didn't play any Power 5 teams. Should SMU really be penalized for playing a tougher schedule? I get that, and I think SMU's probably a better team. But I don't think they're going to put a 2-loss team over an undefeated team. If SMU had 1 loss, then I think they'd probably put them over Liberty. That's another thing this committee has really, they have not put many teams ahead of teams that have fewer losses. So they haven't put many 2-loss teams ahead of 1-loss teams earlier when they're doing the rankings. They pretty much went in order of the teams with losses, the 0-loss teams, then the 1-loss teams, then 2-loss teams for the most part. And so I think that's what's going to happen here. And again, that kind of goes back to Florida State as well. Missouri gets there after their great season. And then in the Peach Bowl, I hope we see this matchup, Georgia versus Ohio State. That one would be a lot of fun. And I think there's a very real possibility both those teams wind up in the same bowl. Maybe they don't go to the Peach Bowl, maybe they go to the Cotton Bowl or something, but I think they're probably going to match them up just based off of the semifinal game last year. And then the Fiesta Bowl, I've got Oregon versus Penn State here in the final New Year's Six Bowl. So that's what I'm projecting. We'd love to get your thoughts, your predictions, and hopefully we'll come back and do a reaction video to those rankings that come out tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sticking with us all college football season long. I haven't done a whole lot on this channel. I realize it's just been kind of the bare minimum. That's for a variety of different reasons, but I'm probably going to start turning that around, doing some recaps and things of this season, and really getting back. It's not long, so we'll start previewing next season. So hopefully you subscribe, hopefully you enjoy the videos, and again, thank you for sticking with us. Thanks for watching this video, and again, give me your comments down below.